Hi folks, today we're talking about the circus that passes for discourse these days, where leftist YouTubers like Chad trade in misrepresentation and bad faith arguments wrapped up in a layer of snark and mockery. We're living in a time where facts and context are optional and the loudest voice wins, even if it's completely wrong. This is the world where traditional values, family, and faith get caricatured into punchlines, while the contradictions of so-called progressive ideals are left completely unchecked. But that's why we're here, to peel back the layers of hypocrisy and expose the dishonesty hiding behind the humor. Now, the video that we're looking at today may be 8 months old, but when I came across it, I realized it was a perfect place to start this series. Today, we're diving into Chad's critique of Harrison Butker's graduation speech, a textbook example of how humor and ridicule are weaponized to distract from intellectual laziness and outright dishonesty. She cherry-picks his statements, strips them of context, and caricatures his message to paint a distorted picture of traditional and faith-based values. What's worse, she conveniently sidesteps the broader religious and cultural context of his speech while misrepresenting his points about family and vocation. This isn't just a defense of faith and family. It's about setting a new standard for accountability and exposing how the left manipulates discourse to tear down values that uphold individual meaning and societal stability, replacing them with an ideology that prioritizes division and dependence on the state over personal and spiritual fulfillment. So let's start with Chad's opening, where she kicks things off with some casual mockery of Harrison Butker. It's all meant to be funny, but it sets the tone for a video that trades genuine critique for cheap laughs at the expense of context and honesty.
Hey guys, today we're talking about men who kick balls and men whose balls we'd like to kick. A twinge of cringe. My name is Chad. Not really. And imagine you're a hardworking woman. If you're already a hardworking woman, you can just sit there. You've done enough. Now imagine you've dedicated years to your education, countless sleepless nights and energy drinks, all while working a job, or 2 maybe, or maybe even 3. Who knows? Everything sucks right now, but it was all worth it because today it's finally over. You've done it. Your friends and family surround you, beaming with pride as you toss your cap in the air and celebrate one of the biggest achievements of your life. And then a guy gets on stage and says this.
I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now about to cross this stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
If you don't know who this is, lucky, this is Harrison Butker, and he is a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. More like Kansas Shitty Chiefs, am I right?
Haha, good one, Chad. Up top, God, Chad. No, don't.
If you don't know who they are Taylor Swift's football team. And if you don't know what football is, figure it out. I can't hold your hand through all of this.
Chad paints this melodramatic picture of hard-working graduates, exhausted from years of effort, only to have Harrison Butker supposedly get up there and trash everything they've accomplished. But let's cut through the theatrics. This is pure misrepresentation. She cherry-picks a snippet of a speech, strips away the context, and twists it into an attack on women's ambitions. The reality, Butker opened by congratulating these graduates and celebrating their hard work. That's not dismissal. That's acknowledgement and respect. But don't just take my word for it. Here's what Harrison Butker actually said, including the part Chad conveniently ignored.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now about to cross this stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
Notice how Harrison starts his speech by congratulating the women graduating, explicitly recognizing their hard work and accomplishments. He says, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. That's the first thing he says when addressing the women in the room. He says, to the ladies, and then says that. A clear acknowledgement of the graduate's success. But you wouldn't know that if you only listen to Chad's version, because she conveniently cut this part out. Instead, she sells a narrative that Butker dismissed their achievements, framing him as some out-of-touch relic telling women to throw away their careers and focus solely on marriage and children. That characterization is blatantly false, and the fact that she left out his opening remarks shows how deliberately misleading her critique is. Chad doesn't just misrepresent what Butker says. She warps the entire context of his message. Butker's comments about marriage and children, which we will see much more of in a few minutes, are rooted in his faith and his belief that vocation, including family life, is a source of profound meaning. He never dismisses career ambitions. In fact, his speech explicitly acknowledges that some graduates will pursue successful careers. But he also offers an alternative perspective, that marriage and family are not burdens, but blessings. And for many people, they are the ultimate source of fulfillment. Chad twists this into an attack on women's autonomy, ignoring the fact that he's simply presenting his values, which align with the ethos of the Catholic college where he was invited to speak. But here's the thing, Butker's perspective is supported by data. According to a 2019 Pew Research Center study, 65% of mothers and 52% of fathers report that parenting is an essential source of their happiness and identity. Meanwhile, the same study highlights that parents who prioritize family over work report higher levels of overall life satisfaction. Similarly, a 2021 Gallup poll found that people who are married report consistently higher levels of happiness and mental health compared to their unmarried counterparts. Butker's argument isn't a baseless dismissal of careers. It's a challenge to the cultural narrative that prioritizes professional achievement above all else, often at the expense of personal relationships and long-term fulfillment. Now let's talk about her rhetorical tactics, because Chad leans heavily on humor to distract from the weaknesses in her argument. She mocks Butker's role as a kicker, referring to the Kansas City Chiefs as the Kansas Shitty Chiefs, and throws in a completely irrelevant joke about Taylor Swift's football connections. This isn't substantive critique, it's filler. By resorting to these tactics, she avoids addressing the actual ideas in Butker's speech. When you have to rely on mocking someone's profession or the name of the team that they play for to make your point, it's a clear sign that your argument is built on a shaky foundation.
Harrison was invited to be the speaker at a graduation ceremony where he decided not to stick to the status quo. No. Stick to the status quo. Did you hear that run? I've got runs. I have the runs. Instead of using his time to inspire graduates or congratulate them on all their hard work, Harrison decided to use his time to complain about things that bother him. And the first thing that bothers him, apparently, is women having careers. And thank goodness he was here to save these women from the diabolical lies such as, hey, if you want to have a job, you can.
Here we see Chad double down on her framing of Butker's speech as a rant against women having careers, claiming he ignored the graduates' accomplishments to instead complain about their choices. According to her, Butker bypassed any inspiration or congratulations and jumped straight into lecturing women about marriage and children. But here's the problem. Once again, she's flat out misrepresenting him. If you actually go to the full video of Butker's speech, you'll see that all the sections are timestamped. The portion about women comes 13 minutes into the speech, after he spent the previous 7 minutes addressing topics like the importance of staying true to one's vocation, standing up for traditional Catholic values, and rejecting cultural pressures that undermine faith and morality. And even in the section where he briefly talks about women, Butker spends less than a minute on it before dedicating the next 6 minutes to challenging men to embrace their responsibilities as fathers, husbands, and leaders. This clearly isn't a speech that singles out women. It's a balanced message about vocation and responsibility for both genders. And if you actually listen to Butker's opening remarks, he explicitly congratulates the graduates and acknowledges their hard work and success. It's clear he's not dismissing their achievements. He's adding a perspective rooted in his faith and values. Chad conveniently leaves this part out to push her narrative that Butker is out to diminish women's autonomy. Now, with all that being said, we've seen how Butker led into the section addressing women by congratulating them. But let's take it a step further. What if there's another section where he congratulates the graduates? Say, right at the very beginning of his speech, before he says anything else? That would be pretty hard to miss, wouldn't it?
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, I would like to start off by congratulating all of you for successfully making it to this achievement today. I'm sure your high school graduation was not what you had imagined, and most likely neither was your first couple years of college. By making it to this moment through all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learned the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary.
The irony here is almost too perfect. Chad, who spends so much time mocking Harrison Butker and inaccurately claiming he's dismissive of the graduates' achievements, ends up being dismissive herself of the entirety of his speech's context. If she had even bothered to watch the first few seconds of the video, she would have seen him open with a warm congratulations to the graduates, explicitly recognizing their hard work and accomplishments, abiding by the very status quo she claims he disregarded. It wasn't buried or hidden. It was literally the first thing he said. By ignoring this key moment, she not only undermines her argument, but destroys her own credibility in the process, showing she can't even meet the most basic ethical standards for commentary.
The true diabolical lies at college are typically more like, this will get you a higher paying salary. You're gonna remember a single vocab word from your 4 semesters of Spanish. Harrison took this opportunity to address women and women only. He doesn't mention the importance of child rearing to the male graduates and brushes off their achievements as being kind of a pit stop on their way to becoming wives. And this might be one of the most inappropriate places to do that ever. The best time to try and tell women what they should be doing with their lives is never, but the worst time is when they're actively doing what they want to do with their lives. They're currently making an achievement toward their career, and you chose this one right now to talk about how they should be getting married. Maybe take a break from the balls and kick rocks for a minute instead.
Chad claims that Harrison Butker dismisses women's achievements, reducing their aspirations to nothing more than a pit stop on the way to becoming wives. She also accuses him of focusing exclusively on women, ignoring male graduates entirely. But, as we've already seen, selective quoting is her favorite tool, and this section is no exception. Now, if you actually watch Butker's full speech, it's clear he acknowledges women's accomplishments while presenting his faith-based perspective on vocation and family as complementary to their success, not a replacement for it. And far from ignoring men, Butker dedicates the majority of his speech to holding them accountable for their roles as leaders and fathers. Let's hear that part Chad conveniently left out, and you can judge for yourself how much of her narrative holds up.
To the gentleman here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture. And when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation.
As we just saw, if anything, Harrison Butker's tone is more critical of men than of women. For men, he highlights their widespread failures in modern society, how the absence of fathers and male leadership contributes to societal chaos, violence, and dysfunction. He outright says that men set the tone of the culture and that their neglect of this role has devastating consequences. By contrast, his message to women is far gentler, sharing a personal story about his wife's career not working out and how she was still able to find deep meaning and fulfillment through her service to her family. It's not a condemnation of women's choices. It's an affirmation that purpose can come in different forms. Chad, however, spins this into a gendered critique that conveniently ignores his pointed challenge to men. Further, Chad's response not only misrepresents Butker, but also undermines itself. She mocks his statement about women being fed diabolical lies by suggesting his critique is baseless. Yet, she then immediately lists two supposed lies people are told in college, claims that higher education guarantees a higher paying salary or that you'll retain the skills you learn, like vocabulary from Spanish classes. Her point is strictly anecdotal, unsupported by any data, and ironically, it proves Butker's argument. People are often sold false promises about what will bring them success and fulfillment. If anything, she demonstrates the very cultural misdirection Butker is critiquing. Adding to the incoherence, Chad includes a completely unrelated statistic that the top 10% of Americans own 70% of the wealth, a Marxist talking point with no correlation to her examples of college lies. It's a blatant distraction, thrown into posture as though she's making a broader, meaningful critique. But her own words betray the hollowness of her argument. She alludes to the ineffectiveness of college training, mentioning how she doesn't remember terms from her classes, inadvertently supporting Butker's broader point about misplaced cultural priorities. Now let's address her central claim that Butker's speech reduces women's values to marriage and children. This is the heart of her straw man argument, and it completely misrepresents what he said. Butker's point wasn't that women should abandon their careers. It was that the cultural narrative telling women to prioritize career above all else is misleading and often leaves people unfulfilled. And again, the numbers actually back this up. According to a 2020 study published in the journal Demography, women in dual earner households report higher levels of stress and lower levels of life satisfaction compared to those who focus primarily on family life. This doesn't mean careers are inherently bad. It means the one-size-fits-all narrative that Chad seems to champion isn't universally fulfilling. What's especially ironic is that Chad accuses Butker of ignoring women's autonomy while she herself erases the voices of women who embrace traditional roles. Millions of women choose to prioritize family and motherhood, not because they're brainwashed or oppressed, but because it's what they want. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, approximately 27% of married mothers with children under 18 choose to stay at home, a decision that, for many, is deeply fulfilling. By mocking this perspective, Chat effectively tells those women their choices are invalid. That's not empowerment, it's condescension.
I'll talk to Harrison all year long, man. I just let him do his thing.
I'll talk to him. Go say hello.
It's not like in the lunchroom. You say hi in the lunchroom?
No, we sit right beside each other in team meeting, and I don't say one word to him, only before the season and after the season. That's the only time I talk to him.
I think this is just a variation of the podcast effect, where something takes hold of some guys the second they touch a microphone. It's like they've never spoken out loud before, and they need to get it all out in that moment while they have the opportunity. All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here at my wedding or baby shower, I don't know. Anyway, this reminds me of how much I hate chunky peanut butter. If I wanted to eat peanuts, I just eat peanuts. Honey, could you talk about our love, maybe? This reminds me of how much I would love for women to never speak again.
Chad's next tactic is to pivot from addressing Harrison Butker's speech to a bizarre detour, showing an out-of-context clip of Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes talking about how he doesn't interact much with Butker during the season. First off, Mahomes isn't roasting Butker. He's explaining the normal professional dynamic of an NFL team. The quarterback and the kicker operate in completely different spheres. Mahomes leads the offense, while Butker, as a kicker, works primarily with a special teams unit. They practice separately, focus on different aspects of the game, and have limited need to interact. The fact that Mahomes says he rarely talks to Butker isn't a reflection on Butker's personality. It's just the reality of how an NFL team functions. But here's a kicker, pun intended. Chad conveniently cuts out the context around the conversation and Mahomes' comments where Mahomes and Pat McAfee are talking about how Butker is an absolute weapon, highlighting his incredible stats, game-winning field goals, and consistency under pressure. Mahomes clearly respects Butker as a critical part of the team, but by editing out this context, Chad tries to sell the narrative that Butker is somehow unliked, ignored, or weird. This is yet another example of her pattern, stripping context to push a dishonest narrative. And let's not forget, if Mahomes actually had an issue with Butker's character or performance, do you think he'd be hyping him up as one of the best kickers in the league? Of course not. Mahomes' comments are all about trust, knowing that if he gets the team into field goal range, Butker can and will deliver. That's professional respect at the highest level. Now, in case you need a second opinion on what Mahomes actually said, here's a full unedited clip of Mahomes talking about Butker. Pay close attention to the parts Chad didn't want you to see.
Did you see his stats? They're putting, obviously you experience his stats. This dude's unreal. Look at this, 44 46 on the year, 15 of 15, 40 plus, 7 of 7, 40, obviously 2 field goals from 50 plus in the Super Bowl. Absolute weapon. He had a game-winning field goal last Super Bowl, game-tying Super Bowl this Super Bowl. Absolute weapon for you, Patrick. And Tommy Townsend's a dog as well. Your specialists are dogs.
Oh, 100%. Coach Tobe does a great job over there, Dave Tobe. He's been mentioned at head coaching interviews along his time in his career in Kansas City. They do a great job. Coach Reed's all about it, man. He wants specialists that can go out there and change the game, and that's what we have. And I don't talk to Harrison all year long, man. I just let him do his thing. But I know if I can just cross that 40, man, if I cross that 40, he's gonna put it through there. So I know if you saw in the game, I got a little pressure, threw it short, and knew Harrison was going to knock it through.
Don't talk to him. Go say hello.
It's not like in the lunchroom. You say hi in the lunchroom?
No, we sit right beside each other in team meeting, and I don't say one word to him, only before the season and after the season. That's the only time I talk to him.
Smart. Hey, it's working.
Now, as if clipping Mahomes out of context wasn't enough, Chad later follows the out-of-context clip with commentary that completely abandons any pretense of engaging with Butker's actual arguments. First, her podcast effect joke about Butker supposedly rambling when given a microphone is a lazy attempt to undermine his credibility. But if we're talking about rambling, how does bringing up chunky peanut butter or wedding speeches contribute to her argument? It doesn't. It's filler, used to distract from the fact that she has no meaningful rebuttal to what Butker actually said. Further, the sarcasm reaches its peak with her comment implying that Butker wishes women would never speak again. This is such a wildly dishonest interpretation that it barely merits a response, but let's address it anyway. Nothing in Butker's speech suggests he's trying to silence women. On the contrary, his message is rooted in encouraging both men and women to embrace their vocations and find fulfillment beyond the fleeting promises of modern culture. By twisting his words into something so absurd, Chad reveals just how far she's willing to go to avoid grappling with his points. Now, what's most telling about this section is how it highlights her inability or unwillingness to engage engage in honest discourse. If she truly believed Butker's ideas were flawed, she'd confront them directly instead of hiding behind humor and misrepresentation. But instead of addressing his arguments about faith, family, and cultural values, she turns the focus on herself, delivering jokes that add nothing of value to the conversation. This isn't satire, it's intellectual avoidance. Chat Chat's reliance on cheap humor and out-of-context implications might be entertaining for her audience, but it does nothing to counter the points Butker made in his speech. If anything, it reveals she has no substantial critique to offer.
He makes a comment about how his wife's life didn't begin until she married him.
I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother.
Which makes it sound like women are mindless NPCs just hovering in a market somewhere until you propose to them with a mermaid pendant.
I need Harrison Butker to know that I love my kids, I love my husband, but my life ended when I had them.
It's pretty conceited, I think, to imply that your wife's life didn't exist until she was legally bound to you. Before we got married, before my wife had the opportunity of marrying me, she was hovering in this dark plane of incommunicable nothingness.
Oh, where is my husband? Won't anyone wed me so I can see the skibbity toilet and taste the watermelon ice disposable vape?
Here, Chat Chat takes a deeply personal anecdote from Harrison Butker about his wife's life choices and twists it into something completely unrecognizable. She mocks his comment that his wife felt her life truly started when she embraced her vocation as a wife and mother, sarcastically implying that this means women are mindless and waiting in some kind of limbo until a man comes along to save them. This is not only a gross misrepresentation of Butker's point, but it's also an incredibly reductive view of women who choose to prioritize family life. Butker wasn't making a blanket statement about all women. He was sharing his wife's personal story, her lived experience of finding meaning and fulfillment in family life. The key word here is choice. His wife's decision to embrace her vocation as a wife and mother wasn't something imposed on her. It was something she found deeply rewarding, and millions of women across the world share similar sentiments, choosing traditional roles not because they're oppressed or brainwashed, but because it brings them purpose and happiness. The irony is Artemis. Chad Chad accuses Butker of being dismissive of women's autonomy, but in her mockery, she dismisses the autonomy of women who make these choices. By reducing Butker's comment to a punchline and mocking his wife's life's choices, she reveals a condescending attitude toward anyone who doesn't conform to her narrow, career-first worldview. What's even more baffling is how she twists this personal story into something oppressive. Butker wasn't saying that women are incomplete without marriage. He was highlighting his wife's fulfillment in her unique path. And for Chad Chad to mock this as though it's somehow a reflection on all women is as dishonest as it is disrespectful. Now, to further clear up this misrepresentation, let's go to the actual clip of Butker talking about his wife's journey so you can see exactly how she distorted his words.
I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
Now that we've seen the clip, it's crystal clear just how far Chad Chad twisted Butker's words. What we just heard wasn't dismissive or oppressive. It was a deeply emotional expression of gratitude. Butker's voice literally cracks as he talks about his wife, describing her role as the most important title of all, and explicitly stating that all of his success is made possible because of her. This isn't a man diminishing women. It's a man giving his wife her flowers, recognizing her sacrifices, and acknowledging that her work enables him to thrive professionally. Far from reducing women to mere vessels for family life, Butker's remarks elevate the importance of his wife's chosen role. He's celebrating her autonomy and the choices she's made, which aligns perfectly with his broader message about finding fulfillment in vocation. For Chad Chad to twist this into a claim that Butker views women as mindless divorce or incomplete until marriage isn't just dishonest, it's downright cynical. And let's not forget the personal depth of Butker's tribute. He recounts how he met his wife in middle school, how she converted to his faith, and how she has been the cornerstone of his success ever since. This isn't some generic platitude. It's a deeply human moment, full of humility and appreciation. For Chad to mock this as though it's oppressive or reductive says far more about her worldview than it does about Butker's.
I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
After telling us how talented he is, he attributes his success to the fact that his wife is a homemaker and primary educator of their children.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
It's fine, I don't care. And I've noticed that a lot of husbands like this don't bring up being a homemaker unless it has to do with them and their own success. It's almost as if what they appreciate most about their wife's hard work is the fact that it's helping them do the actually important hard work. The important man job, career man, work stuff, sport stuff. Important stuff.
Well, I've just gone and had a little observe of his Instagram, and are you noticing anything? And when I say anything, particularly, are you noticing said wife, mother of his children in a single post?
It's not so much I'm proud of her for what she's accomplishing, it's more I'm proud of her for what she's helping me accomplish. Me, the man who does the man job, sport stuff, work stuff, important stuff. But what she's doing is also work. You two just have different jobs. Except hers is raising future members of society and yours is kicking a ball between two sticks. Sometimes, in Harrison's case.
And Butker is hooking and hits the post for the lead. No good.
Chad ironically once again proves Butker's point while trying to mock it. He explicitly states that his wife's role as a homemaker is one of the most important titles of all, highlighting how essential her work is to their family success. Chad brushes this off, saying you two have different jobs, as if that's some sort of rebuttal. But her comment inadvertently validates what Butker is saying, that both sides are vital and that his wife's contributions are equally, if not more, significant. In trying to diminish Butker's message, she ends up undermining her own argument, showing a complete lack of self-awareness in the process and that she likely didn't even do the research necessary to make this video. But Chad doesn't stop there. She brings up a TikTok where someone claims that Butker has never posted a photo of his wife on Instagram. First, let's address how laughably dishonest this line of argumentation is. Butker's Instagram, like many professional athletes, is clearly a work-focused platform. His posts are primarily about football and his team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Given that his public persona is tied to his job, it's entirely reasonable and respectful that he might choose to keep his private life private. And here's an idea Chad didn't seem to consider. Maybe his wife doesn't want to be a public figure. It's possible she values her anonymity, and if that's the case, Butker is honoring her wishes. The idea that a man's love for his wife should be judged by his Instagram feed is as absurd as it is reductive. Then there's the irony of her showing a compilation of Butker missing a couple of kicks and slipping on another, as if that's the sum total of his inabilities. Conveniently, she ignored the clip we already saw where Patrick Mahomes and Pat McAfee, two people who know a little something about football, praised Butker as one of the best kickers in the league. Now, that being said, let's talk stats for a moment. Butker has a career field goal percentage of 88.1%, ranking him among the top kickers in NFL history. In the 2022 season alone, he kicked 7 for 7 on field goals of 50 yards or more, including clutch performances in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. The idea that a couple of misses defines his entire career is as ridiculous as pretending Chad's Instagram feed tells us everything about her values. And let's not overlook the broader point she completely misses. Butker's acknowledgement of his wife isn't about diminishing her or exalting himself. It's about recognizing that success in both family and life is a team effort. While Chad mocks this idea as a man job versus woman job, the reality is that Butker's message celebrates the value of complementary roles. His wife's work as a homemaker is just as vital as his work on the field, and he's saying as much. For Chad to reduce this to a punchline says far more about her inability to respect others' choices than it does about Butker's worldview.
He doesn't stop there, though. He He goes on to bring up every political qualm he has, such as reproductive rights, IVF, and degenerate cultural values. I wonder what cultural values he's talking about. Probably objectively bad ones. Probably, right? Probably bad ones.
I am certain the reporters at the AP could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it.
And during Pride Month, Mr. Butt? During Pride Month, Mr. Posterior? I'm just kidding, I'm behind, so this actually happened last month in May, which makes it perfectly fine. I kind of get it though. He and a group of very sweaty men do play with balls every day, so he has to take a solid stance. Homophobia is the only option. I'm always saying this. I've always said that about homophobia, and that I've always said that about that stuff, and I always will. The thing is, he doesn't even go into detail about pride or what he finds wrong with it. He just throws it in there to make sure we know he doesn't like it. Just a quick little on the way kind of thing. All right, can I get you any extra sauce? You're gonna burn in hell for all of eternity. You know that? So that's a no on the sauce then? No. Can I get some honey mustard, please? Here you go. Thank you. And fuck you.
Now, once again, it's no surprise that Chad's attempt to mock Butker's remarks on cultural values in Pride Month hinges entirely on selective editing and baseless accusations. She frames his comments as nothing more than a homophobic rant, conveniently ignoring the broader faith-based context and the measured tone he actually used. Butker's critique wasn't about attacking individuals. It was a reflection on his Catholic worldview and a call to uphold traditional values in a rapidly changing society. By stripping away this context, Chad not only distorts his message, but undermines her own credibility, something she apparently is very good at, as we've seen so far in this video. Now, let's hear Butker's comments in full. Here's the unedited version so we can judge for ourselves.
This didn't happen by chance. In a deliberate movement to embrace traditional Catholic values, Benedictine has gone from just another liberal arts school with nothing to set it apart to a thriving beacon of light and a reminder to us all that when you embrace tradition, success, worldly and spiritual, will follow. I am certain the reporters at the AP could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it, but the true God-centered pride that is cooperating with the Holy Ghost to glorify Him. Reading that article now shared all over the world, we see that in the complete surrender of self and a turning towards Christ, you will find happiness. Right here in a little town in Kansas.
It's evident after watching Butker's full remarks about cultural values and the AP article about Benedictine College that Chad once again completely misrepresented them. She reduces his thoughtful reflection on tradition and faith to a petty grievance about Pride Month and homophobia, ignoring the full context of his speech. Butker was discussing Benedictine College's success in embracing traditional Catholic values and how those values have helped the college thrive both spiritually and materially. His reference to the AP article was about their attempt to critique Benedictine's adherence to these values, which Butker framed as a celebration of countercultural faith, not a tirade against specific groups. By the way, the AP article in question, titled "Parish's Turmoil as Traditionalism Sweeps U.S. Catholic Church," discusses the rise of traditionalist practices within the Catholic Church in the United States, highlighting Benedictine College as an example. Butker used this article to illustrate how institutions that remain steadfast in their values can stand tall in the face of societal skepticism. His comment about pride wasn't a targeted attack. It was a juxtaposition on God-centered pride versus the cultural celebration of pride that often clashes with religious teachings. In Catholic theology, pride is considered one of the 7 deadly sins because it involves an inordinate self-love that elevates one's desires, achievements, or identity above God's will. This form of pride disrupts the fundamental relationship between humanity and the divine, prioritizing personal autonomy or ego over submission to God's authority. Butker's reference to the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it highlights this distinction. He contrasts the humility and selflessness that traditional Catholic teachings champion with contemporary cultural celebrations that, in his view, often often glorify individualism or personal identity in a way that can conflict with faith-based values. His point emphasizes a return to humility and faith, encouraging believers to ground their sense of self in their relationship with God rather than societal validation. By mocking this point and failing to mention its religious framing, Chad strips away the deeper substance of Butker's argument, leaving behind a caricature designed to provoke outrage. Moreover, her suggestion that Butker's remarks boil down to homophobia is baseless. He doesn't single out LGBTQ+ individuals or even dwell on Pride Month. It's a passing comment within a broader critique of cultural values. Chad ignores his actual focus on surrendering oneself to faith, finding happiness in service to God, and building a life around principles that transcend fleeting societal trend. Chad also attempts to make a quip about Christians condemning homosexuals to hell, which reveals a profound misunderstanding of Catholic principles. The Catholic Church's teachings on homosexuality are often misrepresented as homophobic, but the Church makes a clear distinction between actions and individuals. It calls for respect, compassion, and sensitivity toward LGBTQ+ individuals, recognizing their inherent dignity as children of God. Further, in his letters, Paul the Apostle addresses sexual morality, including homosexual behavior, within the broader context of living a life oriented towards God. In Romans 1:26-27, Paul critiques behaviors that deviate from natural law as a consequence of turning away from God, emphasizing not condemnation, but a universal call for believers to align their lives with divine principles. His writings aim to guide all people, regardless of their specific struggles, toward a God-centered life through self-discipline and humility. In Catholic theology, homosexuality is understood through the lens of natural law, which views sexuality as inherently ordered toward both uniting spouses and creating new life. Homosexual acts, like any sexual activity outside this framework, are seen as prioritizing personal pleasure over the purpose of building families and contributing to the continuity of life. However, the Church's teachings are not about denying the inherent dignity of individuals, but about encouraging all people to cultivate self-control and to live in alignment with God's plan. Catholic values place a strong emphasis on self-restraint, self-sacrifice, and the pursuit of enduring goods over fleeting pleasures. The Church teaches that true fulfillment comes not from indulging every desire, but from building lives grounded in faith, family, and service to others. This perspective is rooted in the belief that stable families, whether biological or spiritual, are essential for the well-being of society. Restraint and self-control are seen not as punitive, but as liberating virtues that free individuals from being dominated by transient desires, enabling them to focus on higher, enduring goals. Paul's message echoes this, reminding believers that true freedom comes from living in accordance with divine purpose and embracing the path that leads to holiness.
He also mentions Congress just passed a bill that will put you in jail for bringing up the Bible.
The world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We fear speaking truth because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. Congress just passed a bill where stating something as basic as the biblical teaching of who killed Jesus could land you in jail.
Where? Guys, we're in the minority. Guys, they want to put us rich white men in jail. Nobody likes rich white men anymore, guys. What are we gonna do? This entire speech feels like he doesn't know where he was gonna be giving it. It's like someone told him he was preparing for a presidential debate or something. And for my first act as president, I'll be making every man grow a beard like this, like I have.
Hey, you can't tell men what to do with their face. That's ridiculous.
Well, can I at least tell women what to do with their ovaries?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
My name is Mr. Butt, and I approve this message.
Chad's flippant dismissal of Butker's statement about truth being in the minority reflects a profound unwillingness to engage with his actual argument. Instead of addressing his point about the cultural sidelining of traditional values, she distorts it into a baseless claim about rich white men feeling oppressed, a statement Butker never expressed. This deliberate misrepresentation doesn't just undermine her critique, it exposes her reliance on caricature and ridicule to avoid grappling with substantive issues. Butker's message wasn't about victimhood. It was a pointed observation about how timeless truths, particularly those rooted in faith, are increasingly treated as taboo in a society obsessed with conformity to fleeting cultural trends. Now, to take this a step further, his mention of Congress passing a law criminalizing biblical teachings may sound exaggerated, but it reflects a growing global trend of restricting religious expression. Additionally, Butker was likely referencing a law that was recently passed in the U.S., the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2023, which has drawn criticism for its potential to chill free speech and religious expression. According to critics like U.S. Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, the bill's reliance on the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism could lead to unintended consequences, such as labeling traditional gospel teachings as anti-Semitic. This definition, which includes phrases like Jews killed Jesus, has raised concerns that biblical narratives might be misconstrued as hate speech, even when presented in their theological context. Such interpretations, critics warn, could potentially suppress traditional Christian teachings under the guise of combating discrimination. Now, this concern is not limited to the United States. According to legal and religious analysts, similar laws in other countries have also sparked controversy. For example, in Scotland, the Hate Crime and Public Order Act of 2021 has been criticized for its potential to criminalize religious speech deemed offensive, even when expressed in private. Similarly, in Finland, a former member of parliament faced legal action under hate speech laws for citing biblical passages that oppose same-sex relationships, illustrating how religious expression can come under scrutiny in increasingly secularized societies. These examples demonstrate how easily laws with vague or overly broad language can be used to infringe on freedom of speech and religion. By highlighting these issues, Butker is not fear-mongering, but drawing attention to a legitimate cultural tension between maintaining religious freedoms and addressing societal shifts and values. What's truly ironic here is that the one thing Chad has succeeded in during this video is undermining herself. Her attempt to dismiss Butker's concerns about truth and censorship falls flat when she immediately distorts his words, creating a straw man to ridicule. This not only weakens her argument, but also reinforces Butker's points about the difficulty of speaking truth in a culture quick to misrepresent and mock dissenting views. As for her claim that Butker doesn't know where he is, this couldn't be further from the truth. He is speaking to an audience at Benedictine College, a Catholic institution deeply rooted in tradition and faith. His remarks are tailored to this context, addressing the students and their shared values. His critique of DEI initiatives and his defense of biblical teachings are not random musings, but intentional reflections on the challenges faced by Christians in today's cultural climate. To suggest otherwise shows either ignorance of the context or a deliberate attempt to obfuscate his message. And let's address the tone of Chad's critique. Her sarcastic jab about Butker proposing all men grow beards, followed by the completely unrelated swipe about women's reproductive rights, doesn't add anything substantive. Instead, it's a distraction meant to belittle rather than engage. This pattern throughout her video, mockery in place of substance, misrepresentation instead of argument, is precisely why her critique collapses under scrutiny.
People started wondering about the process of inviting Harrison as a speaker and why no one reviewed his speech beforehand. And I was wondering that too until I realized that this speech was being given at Benedictine College, which is a private religious school in Kansas.
You also have to keep in mind this was at a Catholic and conservative college. So a lot of the men were like, yeah.
Not only did it seem to get little to no negative feedback from the crowd, it apparently received a standing ovation.
Some of us did boo. Me and my roommate definitely did. There was a standing ovation from everyone in the room, except from me, my roommate, and about 10 to 15 other women.
I still have no clue why he specifically was asked to speak. He didn't attend this college, he was never a student, and he even admits himself at the beginning of his speech that he's not a professional speaker.
And I felt that one graduation speech was more than enough, especially for someone who isn't a professional speaker.
Which is true, but maybe don't start your speech by letting us know how unqualified you are to be giving it. Doesn't exactly instill confidence. I'm no professional doctor. I'm no professional nurse either, all right? I'm no registered anything. I'm not registered or qualified to do anything, just so you know, just putting that out there. Maybe someone else should do my catheter insertion then?
It's pretty evident that Chad is committed to her pattern of cherry-picking examples, selectively presenting information, and misrepresenting Harrison Butker's speech to suit her narrative. One glaring inconsistency is her own admission, less than a minute after mocking Butker for supposedly not knowing where he was giving the speech, that she herself didn't initially consider the context of the venue. She openly acknowledges that the speech was delivered at Benedictine College, a private Catholic and conservative institution. This belated acknowledgement undermines her earlier claims, as the speech's faith-based and traditional values were entirely appropriate for the setting and the audience. Yet she glosses over this to maintain her critique, demonstrating a lack of preparation and self-awareness. Additionally, Chad's claim that she didn't understand why Butker was invited to speak is disingenuous. While she mocks his qualifications, graduation speeches often feature notable figures from outside the institution, chosen not for their eloquence but for their values and achievements. Butker's commitment to faith, family, and traditional values clearly resonated with the college's mission, as evidenced by the standing ovation he received, which she admitted he received as much. Chad dismisses this reception, reducing it to the reactions of a handful of dissenters, as though their minority opinion invalidates the overall positive reception. Now, what's particularly telling, however, is her apparent access to the full speech. Up to this point, Chad relied mostly on TikToks of the speech, presenting snippets stripped of context, yet at one point, she appears to show a clip directly from the speech itself. This raises serious questions about whether she actually viewed the entire speech. If she did, then her omissions and distortions are not simply the result of carelessness, they are deliberate. By knowingly misrepresenting the full context of Butker's remarks, she exposes herself as purposely crafting a dishonest narrative for the sake of ridicule and entertainment. Finally, her mockery of Butker's self-deprecating comment about not being a professional speaker is particularly uncharitable. His humility in acknowledging his lack of public speaking expertise is a common way to connect with an audience, especially at a faith-based institution where sincerity and relatability are valued over polished rhetoric. Chad's derision, on the other hand, suggests that she's more interested in tearing him down than engaging with the substance of his speech.
Once clips of the speech got out, people started sharing their thoughts about it on TikTok.
It is a crazy day when a football player that kicks a ball for a living is saying a speech at a college and telling women, you mean nothing. Your life means nothing until you get married and have kids. In front of women that have spent years working hard, this amazing achievement.
32,509 signatures is crazy work, especially within the span of 2 days.
It is honestly beyond comprehension to understand how in 2024 a man could get up on a stage and say that a woman's life is only meant for marriage and having babies. Absolutely insane.
And for the most part, people were in agreement that this wasn't the most encouraging speech you could give to women. The women.
As we just saw, Chad's next move was to pivot to amplify TikTok reactions that claim Harrison Butker stood on stage and declared women's lives meaningless unless they marry and have children. Let's stop right there. These allegations and Chad's endorsement of them are outright fabrications. Nowhere in Butker's speech does he even come close to saying that women are nothing without marriage or children. What he actually says, as we've seen earlier in this video, is that the cultural emphasis on careerism at the expense of family life is a diabolical lie that leaves many people unfulfilled. A point he framed in a deeply faith-based context addressing both men and women. Then she plays TikTok clips of people dramatically summarizing Butker's message as your life means nothing unless you get married and have kids. The problem is these hot takes completely strip away the nuance and intent of his remarks. In reality, Butker congratulated the graduates on their accomplishments, celebrated their hard work, and called on them to reflect what truly brings joy and fulfillment. He shared a personal story about his wife, who transitioned from pursuing a career to finding happiness in her vocation as a wife and mother, a decision she made, not one imposed on her. The idea that Butker was dismissing women's achievements is not only inaccurate, it's deliberately misleading. But I guess that's how you get engagement on the internet nowadays. Chad's decision to highlight these TikTok reactions says a lot about her approach. Instead of engaging with Butker's actual words, she chooses cherry-picked, emotionally charged comments from social media to frame him as a misogynist. This tactic might be effective for generating outrage, but it's not rooted in truth or fairness. And the irony is palpable. She accuses Butker of undermining women while simultaneously dismissing the voices of countless women who find deep meaning and fulfillment in traditional roles. By mocking their choices and framing them as inferior, she ends up doing exactly what she accuses him of, telling women what they should and shouldn't value. Next, let's address the supposed petition that's referenced by a TikToker, boasting thousands of signatures in just 2 days. Now, while this is treated as proof of widespread outrage, let's be honest, online petitions require a couple of clicks and little to no effort. They're hardly a representative measure of genuine public sentiment, especially when the speech was met with a standing ovation at Benedictine College. The overwhelmingly positive reception from the very audience Butker was addressing contradicts the narrative entirely. But here's a kicker. Chad knows the speech wasn't aimed at a general audience. It was given at this Catholic college, a private conservative institution. This was a community of people who share Butker's faith and values, which is why the message resonated so strongly. Ignoring the context isn't just lazy, it's dishonest.
Of course, you know what they say, behind every loud-spoken misogynistic man, there is a loud-spoken misogynistic Brett Cooper.
With a college degree and a career and no children yet, I can confidently say that Harrison Butker is right. And there is nothing wrong with a man in tears celebrating his wife and thanking her for the sacrifices that she makes every single day for their family and their children, and the sacrifices that every mother around the world makes for her family.
No one is saying it's wrong for him to thank his wife. He basically told a crowd full of women that they shouldn't be doing what they're currently doing. He claimed they'd been fed lies by choosing to pursue a career. Mr. Posterior's wife is allowed to do whatever she wants, and the female graduates in this room are allowed to do whatever they want without some football guy dude trying to convince them otherwise.
And it's not wrong to acknowledge that millions of women around the world desperately want to be a homemaker.
Are the millions of women with us in this one room at Benedictine College? We're not talking about women who want to have a family and don't want to go to college. That's a completely different demographic. Not to say that some women at this graduation don't want to have a family. I'm sure plenty of them do. But the fact that the only address to women he makes during this entire graduation ceremony is to brush off their accomplishments and basically say it means nothing in comparison to their wifely duties. Boo. Tomato, potato, tomato, potato. I don't know what we expected, though. He does have the literal word but in his name. Anything that comes out of him is gonna be shit.
Now, we already know how Chad operates. She dismisses, misrepresents, and creates straw man arguments instead of actually addressing the substance of what Butker is saying. And in the clip we just watched, it's no different. Chad makes a distinction between women who want to be homemakers and those who attend college, implying these are mutually exclusive categories. This is an inaccurate and frankly outdated assumption. According to the Pew Research Center, 60% of millennial women say being a good parent is one of the most important goals in life. And about half of them also rank having a successful career as equally important. Women who pursue higher education are not rejecting family roles. They are often seeking ways to balance both. The cultural narrative she's promoting, one that assumes careerism and homemaking are at odds, ignores the lived reality of millions of women. Moreover, the data suggests that interest in traditional family roles hasn't diminished as much as Chad implies. A 2022 study from the Institute of Family Studies found that 56% of women ages 18 to 34 see raising a family as central to their happiness, compared to 52% in 1997. This slight increase contradicts the notion that younger generations of women have wholly abandoned these values. Chad's argument rests on a false dichotomy that oversimplifies women's goals and underestimates the complexity of their choices. Her commentary also betrays a lack of understanding of the context in which Butker was speaking. All right, let's take a step back and consider what Chad's perspective and her blatant dishonesty means for faith, family, and the broader cultural landscape. Videos like hers, riddled with mockery and straw man arguments, aren't just entertaining to over 1 million viewers. They're shaping opinions and reinforcing a worldview that often substitutes the state or societal approval for faith in God. For people like Chad, who seem to treat state-sponsored ideology as their religion, the rejection of faith-based values is almost reflexive, driven by a desire to elevate individualism or state-sanctioned norms over the spiritual foundations that have guided humanity for centuries. When humor replaces substance and ridicule stands in for genuine engagement, it doesn't just create a cultural echo chamber, it fosters a society where faith is sidelined, dismissed as irrelevant, and replaced by shallow, ever-changing dogmas. This actually highlights something far more insidious: the goals of Marxist ideology to undermine the fabric of American life. Faith and family are foundational pillars that provide people with identity, meaning, and resilience, and by trivializing or mocking these values, cultural influencers like Chad contribute to the erosion of these cornerstones. When faith is replaced by blind allegiance allegiance to the state and traditional values are ridiculed, the groundwork is laid for a society increasingly divided, disillusioned, and disconnected from its roots. If 1 million people are watching and absorbing this kind of content, it's a sobering reminder of just how critical it is to fight for honest, meaningful discourse that preserves the principles that truly strengthen communities and empower individuals. So ask yourself, what does it mean when creators like Chad, who claim to be challenging outdated values, are instead peddling surface-level critiques that deliberately ignore context and nuance? Are audiences being informed, or are they being misled into thinking they're in on the joke while missing the bigger picture entirely? In a world where over 1 million people watch content like this, are we content to let shallow commentary shape cultural narratives, or is it time to demand better arguments, better accountability, and deeper understanding of the issues that truly matter? The question isn't just about Chad's video, it's about whether we're willing to let voices like hers dominate the conversation without ever truly saying anything of substance. What do you think? Tell me in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.